Hi, friends. Welcome back. It's been so long. All right, as we are calling ourselves in, come on in. I'd like to call us together in prayer. Then we're going to go over a little bit about where we are in the process, what the point is of today, and then Jenna's going to take us through how we're going to do today. Then we're going to get to the question and answer period. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, let's pray together. God, clothe us in kindness and gentleness and humility and curiosity. Clothe us in love, clothe us in hopefulness. Let us bring ourselves to this place as vehicles for your Spirit to emerge in conversation and hopefulness with one another. Bring us a discerning spirit, a listening spirit, a hopeful spirit. Because, God, we are gathering this day in deep and profound gratitude for the life of this congregation and for all of those who have come before to bring us to this place, for all of the work that has gone to bring us to this day, and for the joy that we have experienced in this place that we get to bring now in possibility to you. So may we be guided in the Spirit this morning and conduct this gathering in your name, and in the name of your love, just waiting to pour out into a world waiting to be made new. Amen. So just a few notes about where we are in the process for those of you for whom this might be your first gathering or second, or just to catch you up. Like I said in worship this morning, 2020 our visioning team was commissioned, which was amazing. They are doing a shockingly good job. They've stuck in there. I'm just amazed. And they started us with listening sessions. And I'm hopeful that most of us who were here at the time participated in a community meeting where we talked about all of our ideas. Because from there, that was a good majority of us did, and from there, the vision team took that information and got a reading list for us to read. Right? And so then we spent some time reading the books that were generated from those listening sessions. And from the feedback that we got in the listening sessions, from the information we gleaned from those books, last year's Lenten series, we asked for proposals. Over 40 proposals were submitted. We gathered together in discernment to narrow those down to the ones that we really wanted to focus on and put our heart and our sweat and our soul into, to develop into higher level proposals that are coming back to us today. So starting this summer, those 5 groups started to work on the proposals that you are going to see today. That means that people have been working since the summer or since September really hard, which I think you can tell when you lift up those proposals. They're incredible. There has been so much time and thought and prayer and effort put into these. And so I just want to take a moment to recognize that. So first things first, can you raise your hand if you served on one of the working groups for one of the proposals? That's amazing. Thank you. Big round of applause. What we come to this week is a really significant point in the church's history, right? Because we are able to do this well in a way that sets a new path forward. Not a lot of churches get this kind of opportunity, right? To throw open the doors and to vision and to come together in love and to really let their spirits discern where God is leading us. So, I certainly never dreamed in my entire ministry we'd be going through a visioning project with the kind of proposals that we have in front of us today. They're remarkable, and what a gift we have. So what we're doing today, this is a time for questions, right? This is not a time in the process. We've gone through a lot of study and a lot of work. Today is for questions and answers directly related to this proposal, the proposals as they have been put forward, right? It's not a time to say, well, I think we should do this. That time was last year, right? That time was a year and a half ago. This time is to honor the work that's been done and to ask clarifying questions. It is also, and I want to be clear about this, it is not a time to discuss the use of the Ronald McDonald House funds. Some of them are mentioned in the proposals, right? because each proposal was asked to discuss or discern the best ways to raise money for that particular proposal. But what we are doing this day is we are letting our hearts discern where God is calling us. The question of feasibility is the next step, and the exact conversation around funds is the next step, right? Does that make sense to everybody? So those proposal groups have suggested that the funds may be the way to do it. That doesn't mean that that's where we are going to get to as a congregation. So from here, we're going to ask questions today. Next week, we'll be doing some discernment. I'm going to talk to you a little bit later about what discernment actually means. After our discernment, I'm not sure if I'm stepping on where you were going to go.
It's okay.
Sorry, I'm just I've got a train of thought that I'm following because otherwise I'm off the tracks. Next week, we're going to be discerning together, and Jen will talk to you a little bit about what that is and what that is not. But from there, the vision team will craft the strategic plan, which is what they were originally charged with, right? We've talked about this a couple times. That strategic plan will go to trustees, have some conversation, and then come back to us again, right? So we are not, at this point, it is not the end of the process. We are getting there. We're getting there. I keep saying this to the visioning team. It's been 3 years. They're amazing. But what we're doing today is asking questions about the proposals as they are. What we're doing next week is doing some discernment. And then there will be some time for some throwing open after that as the strategic plan comes forward. So does that sort of make sense to everybody? Okay. So the last thing that I want to stress before I turn it over to you is the opportunity again, right? Systems repeat themselves, and they always do. This is the opportunity for a system to reset, right? This visioning process is a way for us to come together in a whole new way, to grow from our history and to transform our history precisely like we are talking about in this Lenten series, right? To think about how do we discern the love of God and neighbor in this congregation and outside these walls. To have a proof text of that so vividly in our midst is a gift that we might not get again in our life, right? So congratulations, friends. This is really exciting, and I'm glad to be doing this with you. So Jen, I'm going to turn this over to you for a little bit more about what we're doing today. And actually, before I do that, because I know one of you might have to leave, can the vision team stand up? Those of you who are here? Rob, Susan, Charlie, Jen, Tony. Mandy's not able to be here. These folks have met every week, sometimes multiple times a week, for years to get us to this point.
On Saturday at 8.
At 8. At 8, yes. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. All right.
All right. I'm Jennifer Jorgensen with the visioning team, and just want to do a rundown of our short time together today. But before we get started, I'm going to pass these out to folks that didn't grab them at the door. But I would love Michelle Hobbs to stand, please. I know, Michelle, but stand up. Round of applause for Michelle, please. Earlier this week, you received, and maybe last week too, if I'm not mistaken, the full proposals. They were linked on the website and also sent out in the e-newsletter. So my hope is that you have read those. And if you haven't, I'd encourage you to do that before next week. But what Michelle has done is really dug into all of the meat and information contained in those proposals and distilled it in a really nice visual way that can help us make sense of themes, priorities, goals, possible kind of components of each of those proposals. What I will say is Michelle did not put the whole proposal in that one pager. And there's a purpose for that. So you might see something that's not included. Again, refer back to the whole proposal, but this is a nice way for us to envision, to see each of the proposals as we begin to dialogue about question and answers. For folks that are joining online, there are links to these as well for you to be looking at. So our time for today, I'm going to give you 5+ minutes to continue to take a look at each of these kind of one-pager designs around each of the proposals. After you have time to review that, I'll kind of draw everyone back, and we will just have the work groups come up one at a time, along with the vision member that might be a part of that. I'll just have you kind of come up towards the front, and we'll have some targeted time. So for example, Ed Hub will come up, and questions that you have about the full proposal that you read or about the document you see in front of you, we'll ask members of that team to field your questions. And then when we're done with those questions, we'll move on to the next. So after we do some reading of the document, we'll do the small group question and answers. And then we'll be ending our time together with Alyssa will lead us through a discernment activity to kind of get us thinking about what it looks like for us to be called by God and to be in touch with where we as a church feel led to move in the future before we get back together next week to really collectively discern our priorities. So I'm going to stop talking so you can have 5 to 7 minutes to look at them. And then we will come back together for your questions. Great. I know it was a short period of time. I really hope you have read the full proposals. And again, just a plug if you haven't, perhaps after looking at these design documents today and hearing the questions and answers, it'll be a prompt for you to go back. I also want to let folks know that this is being recorded so that if you want to revisit it or make sure others are able to hear some of the questions and answers, this will be available as well. We're going to spend about 10 minutes just with our time frame of when we're hoping to wrap up for a number of reasons, including a lot of our families, myself included, with younger children here. So we'll have 10 minutes per proposal, and then we'll kind of shift. So just be mindful of trying to share the space if possible so that multiple people can ask questions and could have answers. But based on the document in front of me, I'm just looking, it's not because I was part of this small group or have favoritism towards the Ed Hub, but it's just the first sheet up here. But I'm wondering if Ed Hub members that are here wouldn't mind kind of making their way up so that I'm not the one answering all of the questions. And would love to just create space here. If folks have questions specific to Ed Hub, I can come to you with the microphone to ask the questions. And yeah.
Can I answer questions from here?
Yes, I can bring the, yes. Lou's holding multiple responsibilities right now. So we have Lou and Bill and I here. Rob was here and had to leave. So any questions, just raise your hand and I'll come to you so that everyone could hear your question, especially those joining us online. Any questions about the Educational Hub proposal as written?
This is my first time seeing this version of the program, and I wonder what happened to the church history project.
Yes.
It's
still in there.
still in there, but not on this page.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so perfect example of one of the items, kind of the specific details of the full proposal not being specifically named. So I appreciate that question, Bill. There was a desire, and part of our proposal included church history and having a church history project and a possible stipend for an intern, perhaps with one of the local universities to help us kind of move that work forward. Any other Ed Hub questions? Great.
Being an octogenarian, I like this proposal. However, it states clearly, families, youth.
Can you move the mic
They won't be
to
able
your
to hear
mouth?
you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. It states families, youth, and young adults. And I'm just wondering if we could add us old people to this, because some of us are feeling somewhat left out.
I so appreciate that, Judy, and I look to my team members to be able to speak to that too. I think part of the specifically naming those individuals, that came from some of the proposals that were provided that we were looking at. I think a lot of the affinity groups I'm trying to see here on our name, what we actually named it. The conversation spaces were really adult focused. So that would be either Bible studies, book groups, cancer survivors, going through divorce. It could be a number of topics where there was a specific need raised for young children, families, not necessarily feeling active or having opportunity. But yes, it is for the babies being baptized here to the oldest of members that would ideally be served by the Ed Hub. Andy? I'm going to come to you because I appreciate the big voice, but what I've learned more and more with training is some people still can't hear without the mic.
Thank you. Now I have a really big voice. Just to give me a sense for the phase of development, some of the partners or potential partners that are mentioned here, New Alpha, Abenaki Brothers and Sisters, for example, where are we in the conversation with them at this point? Have we connected with them at a conceptual level, or are we just imagining they might be partners, or have we had more extensive conversations with them?
That's a great question. Were you looking at Ed Hub, or were you looking at the partnering with current programs? Oh, the community dinners? Okay.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
The question was, have we done any outreach, or where are we at status-wise with those groups?
So part of the process for Ed Hub, and we met with this group a lot, was the partnering with current programs and expansion because we had some overlap. So our task as the Ed Hub group is to be able to create those spaces that we are able to use our committee of partnering and outreach to these individuals. The Ed Hub proposal is to be able to facilitate that space more accessibly. So this is obviously the beginning, the 35,000 or 10,000 air view, but we did work very closely with the partnering with current programs and expansion when we talked about what this would look like to host these community dinners.
Yeah, so I can, do you want to restate it, Andy, or do you want me to? Okay, so I think we have not reached out to those groups, right? Those were groups that were identified in proposals that we included in what we were looking at. They're named as possible groups that could be doing presentations or using space or called in. I think primarily also as a result of the book groups that we did as part of this visioning process. But we did not reach out to groups to begin or exploring without knowing if this is something that would move forward or not. And I also, yep, so we'll get to it, yeah, with your questions, but we did not. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be figured out, but specifically to your question, Andy, we didn't, and I would imagine the Ed Hub would include all sorts of groups that we haven't even imagined, and that would evolve over time. But I think, I'm not supposed to be giving a overview of the proposal, but kind of at its core, we were looking at what infrastructure, what space needs to change, what staffing or resources would need to be available to successfully coordinate an Ed Hub, and we weren't as focused on the specific groups that it might serve as more looking at kind of buckets of groups that might be served through the Ed Hub. Any other Ed Hub specific questions?
Just a question about the part-time staff position. Did you look into having the job description for the new director of creative ministries take this on as part of her assignment or his assignment?
We did look at that. I think the reality is we burned through the last two people in that position, quite honestly. I mean, that's where,
Yeah.
I joke, but I don't. So we named it as a justice issue, to not continue to ask people to do more and more, but to really look at how we can support and resource staff to have a sustainable work life and expectations. And so we kind of firmly stood, and we need to pay or allow for extra staffing resources to be able to have this be successful. It could be that the new position of the Director of Creative, what is the title?
That Hannah's position was a director of creative ministries. That may not be what we go with.
It might be that some of their hours would be focused on this, but it then means that some of the work that they were holding would need to be covered somewhere else. So it really came down to us feeling like it was an equity issue. I just personally have had connection to both Ava and Hannah, and just am aware of how much they actually had to work. And it was not sustainable. And part of why I think people have to leave, because they can't sustain that level of work. And we need someone that can stay here and continue to do that good work and feel like it's doable.
Great.
This is from Paul. He is asking whether additional security, staff helpers, and janitorial time expense was factored into the Ed Hub review. Thanks, Jennifer. We did discuss and reach out to the treasurer and the office and Mike Nauer and the person who does our accounting, Heather. I'm sorry, there's a lot of names in my head. And we did get a quote about hourly rate. And we did take this into our assessment and our costs for additional staff. As we know, when the church is open for an event, we need security staff, at least. We may need more janitorial staff. So this is not just we need a new staff member. This is the more we have our church open, the more staff support we're going to need.
It's identified in the full proposal. We don't have numbers attached to it because I think that's part of the feasibility of taking a look at how many hours that would actually be and would that be scaled up over time. But we did name childcare and security, and the Ed Hub staffing is a part of what was needed. We did run out of time, but if there was one burning last minute question about Ed Hub, I'll take it before we shift. Okay. Thank you, Ed Hub. Childcare. Oh, did you have a question, Diana? Okay. As Diana asked the question, if the childcare subgroup can come forward.
This is the Ed Hub. I think you mentioned that historical might be part of this. Okay. Well, Vicki Harlow and I were on the historical committee a long time ago, and there could be little blurbs, like I have a whole bunch of information about people that have gone before us and things that have gone before us to explain some of the things that are in the church here that I'd be happy to do 2 or 3 minute things on Sundays or whatever, occasionally. So you could take advantage of that if anybody is interested.
Super interested. Part of why it's part of the proposal, and I think that would be, one, it's a wonderful offer, and two, I think that would be a great way for us to use the Ed Hub, is to continue to share out history around our church.
And I just want to add, there was a comment online that is worth, that Liz Emmett says there's been a pilot in St. J of a community hub for the last few years. It's been quite successful as a model for this. And even the staffing cost, she asks, is it shared with community partners on that project? That's a great question.
It's a great question. Not something we figured out, but something to take up if this moves forward in the strategic planning. So childcare, thank you so much for all of your work on your proposal. Want to open it up. Sorry, I'm not texting on my phone. I'm just using it for timing. First question about childcare. Question about the childcare proposal. Okay, Jamie? Sure. Sorry, I introduced my group, didn't I? It's kind of rude. You want to start, Diane?
Diane Griffiths.
Julie Cadwallader Staub.
Al Weldon.
Bob Phillips.
Charlie Smith.
Thank you, Jamie.
Good morning. I just want to ask, when you discussed with Robin's Nest and Pine Forest and perhaps others, that this is an incremental effort on their part, that their interest is based on it being not their main place, but rather a supplemental to their current businesses. One of the objectives is that there be more child care positions available. So did you discuss that with those potential partners?
Thank you. I'm coming with the mic. Just 1 second. Sorry, I'm getting my steps in today, though.
Max, do we have a second handheld?
I visited Robin's Nest, and we did have that conversation, and understanding that our intention here is to add spots, childcare spots, not just replace those that exist today.
What other questions do you have about childcare?
Was there actually some discussion with the Ronald McDonald House people about the possibility of having a common playground? I noticed it was mentioned in the proposal.
Great question.
Yes. Simply, yeah.
And it is a possibility.
Yes. I mean, just through I think it was a phone call, conversation with those folks, and they'd be willing to share the space. Specifics down the road.
I just also want to mention, as I've been told online, that Elizabeth Emmett was part of this child care group. So I just wanted to do a shout out to Elizabeth, since she is here in spirit and not in physical body.
Am I on?
Can
I have
just-
a question about the lease arrangement. Would the intention of that lease be to give essentially a very low-cost lease that would subsidize the child care provider, or would part of that intention be for us to earn income from the lease of the space?
We did discuss that at length, and I think we concluded that we would charge a market rate so as to not interfere with the whole marketplace of child care providers. Everybody would be on an equal footing. But then we wouldn't, that income, and the lease would cover any additional utility expenses and such associated with having the child care here. But then any extra money would actually go towards a scholarship or stipends for care providers and children to attend tuition. So it would not be income generating for the church. Can I just add, I mean, it's in the other, Elizabeth Emmett, Linda Elrick, John Floyd, Betsy Freeman, Bobby Hosell, Steve Hyde, were all members of this group, as well as those that are here.
Hi, I'm just curious if the potential partners indicated anything about feasibility on their end, especially in relation to staffing, which is obviously such an issue right now. Would they be able to actually staff it?
So the question is in terms of discussion with Pine Forest and Robin's Nest. Were there concerns about their ability and the staffing issue to be able to serve this space here?
Yeah, I can speak to Robin's Nest. That's a continuing concern, and it is even now with regard to our proposal. That's one of the issues that we're dealing with locally and universally. So yeah, it is a concern.
Pine Forest, in fact, is going to be leaving their current space. And they felt that First Congregational Church, that our space here was ideal. And but one of their concerns, of course, is staffing, and that will be an ongoing issue, I think, with any proposal.
I have Donald, Mike.
Can I just say something quickly about that on the wages issue, which is not just Burlington, but nationally, that there is legislation pending that, Bob, maybe you want to talk more about, that Let's Grow Kids is advocating for. And I think it just moved to the Senate. I think it just went from the House to the Senate. That would, in part, address the wages issue. Do you want to say anything else about that?
So my question was just about, sort of nuts and bolts, but how far have you gotten on as far as an environmental assessment of the building versus the childcare use? I did the renovations at the ONECC where Robin's Nest is now, and there's a lot of issues about is there any lead solder in the pipes and that sort of stuff that can be really very difficult to overcome. So I just wanted to see where you guys were at in that process.
You want to let Ann answer that?
Well, with respect to, as a group, we certainly, I think, acknowledged there'd be those concerns, and they certainly would have to be looked into and addressed. At the same time, we knew that there was, one of the other proposed environmental assessment. So we didn't delve into it, but certainly it will need to be addressed.
Yes. Besides the bricks and mortar and funding aspects to this, of very much importance to me is the mission. And as we would enter into a partnership with another provider, how much control or how much influence would we be able to maintain? And this, I assume you probably discussed this with the potential partners, to fulfill the mission as you stated, or as the mission may evolve. How much influence would we still have?
To some extent, to be determined, but by what we want. But what the thought process is, we will be putting out, and we show here 2 potential providers, but we actually think there's probably several more. Those are just the 2 that we happened to speak with, and they both were very interested. So the process with a thumbs up here would be to put together a request for proposals that we would send out to a number of potential partners. And in that RFP, I think we would lay out what we're looking for, the type of partnership that we would want, and the amount of interaction and cooperation that we would have. So it's, again, not absolute, but I think the idea is that we would be involved, and we would have an interest.
Additionally, in our proposal, we indicate that we would expect that a group would be established here at First Church that would be responsible for ongoing dialogue with the contractor, whomever that might be, so that they would be serving an oversight position with regard to the initial agreement and any changes that were to be made to it.
I have Donna and then
Okay, my question is twofold. You mentioned Pine Forest thought our space was ideal. I would want to know which of our spaces they thought was ideal. And secondly, they're thinking of moving. So would we actually then be increasing slots, or would it just be a parallel move, and so the slots would not be increasing, they would stay the same?
What about that? Do you want to address that?
Pine Forest will not renew their lease and is looking for other space for either part or all of. I think they have about, what did we say, about 80 kids there. And so taking a portion of those to another area is something they would be looking at. So to be determined. We did involve ourselves with the city and with all of the certification groups that looked at our space and the areas that we had. And it was optimal from their point of view.
Which of our spaces did they implement?
All of them.
So we just have one. We're out of time, as you heard my son. But we're going to have Lou, Cindy, and Bucky, and then we'll have to move on to our next group.
This is a question from online from Joan and John, actually a two-parter. Do the proposed spaces get extra warm in the summer, especially with infants? Will air conditioning be needed? And will there be storage space for the multi-seat strollers that have been seen with babies, toddlers in them?
Can you answer that one? I can't hear.
Well, all that would need to be addressed. There's no question about that. The storage, the air conditioning, all of that would have to be part of the environmental work that was needed.
Those costs were in the numbers that were included in the full proposal, all of that. The environmental and the mechanical systems cost all of it.
Can you repeat that into the mic? So the mechanical systems cost was included in the estimates there on the proposal.
Did you have an answer to the storage? Did I not try? Okay, to be determined. Cindy, question?
You mentioned that if we use the first floor, that cannot be used as on Sundays for our church service. Is that correct or not?
No.
No, we can't, or no, that's not correct.
When you say it can't be used on Sunday, what portion are you talking about? The Sunday school rooms?
So, yeah, the nursery, the present nursery and toddler room.
They would not be available. They would have, those operations would have to be moved to some other location.
Okay.
Because the childcare operation would have exclusive use of the spaces.
That was my understanding. So I guess a question I have is, where are we designing it? I don't happen to see it in the building, and maybe that hasn't been worked out yet.
You mean the location for these other activities?
As to where are we going to put our toddlers in?
Well, I think we merely indicated that it would be found, but we don't know exactly what would be the spot. But we thought one of the options would be the chapel, in some subdivision of that, if there's going to be some work there. But we did not address specifically where those activities would move to.
Remember that nursery school through first grade has to be on the level of exit discharge, so first floor. Okay, I'm going to go to Baki for our last question.
Can I just we came to that conclusion, a recommendation based on talking with others. The sharing of space between a Sunday and, there's several day childcare in churches, and there's been issues where they share space. So that's why we made that point.
Space. I just want to clarify that multi-purpose rooms, for example, like if the kids wanted to run around in a multi-purpose room, that's fine, but sharing dedicated space, like where the kids sleep, eat, play. But right, if the kids wanted to play around in another space during the week, we could still use that space. Does that make sense? I think we need to make that clear. My kids run around in the Ojave Zedek Social Hall all the time.
Volunteering as a first responder, I am very aware of a lot of mental health issues around here and security. So I don't know what we gonna implement for security system if we have a childcare in that capacity.
So there is a security system proposed and a cost for it in the estimates?
In the full proposal?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Great.
In either arrangement in terms of space.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Child Care Group. You are released from the spotlight. Building Renovation Subgroup, if you can come up. Yeah, nice. We'll start first with some introductions.
And I want to let those of you who are watching online know, in case you're not following the chat, these sheets have now been posted in PDF form in the chat for you to download. So in addition to going out this week in an email, you can also download them from the chat right now if that's easier for you to see, in case you weren't reading the chat.
Amy Mellencamp.
Donna Lee.
Susan Saunders.
Mike Nauer.
Ann Vivian.
Michelle Hobbs.
Great. First question for Building and Renovations about their proposal.
If you start developing community music space for private lessons and local musicians, aren't you competing with several other churches and organizations like the Vermont Youth Orchestra?
Well, we didn't recognize it as competing. We did a little bit of interviewing of local musicians, teachers, who claim that, you know, that's a resource for them, but they're always looking for additional resources. And we try to get an understanding of what that cost would be and how accessible that is. So I don't know if that's a fair question, but I don't, my sense is that it wasn't.
I might be completely speaking out of turn. I am speaking out of turn, but I do know the like Vermont Folk Life and Young Traditionalists. So like my daughter Avon right now is at City Hall playing at the Irish Music kind of Heritage Festival. They don't have places to meet. And so they're actually renting out and using our space this summer for their summer camps. So there are a lot of music groups that don't have dedicated space in addition to VYO. What's happening, you know, the stuff that's happening at Alley Long.
And you're not speaking out of turn, because if you notice some of the color coding, that's also a consideration in
Yes.
EdHub.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Well done, Michelle.
I have two questions. The first one is,
Point it at your mouth. Point the thing
Is
at
that
your
better?
mouth. Point it.
oh, okay, all right. Okay, good,
this.
thank you. First question, I don't notice there's any entry in here about the exterior of the building. The painting, the columns and so forth. Does that not appear essential, or is it being handled in some other fashion? It's already happening.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, but the plan is for it to be happening this summer.
So we already have the funds
We don't need to
for
include
that.
it in this. It's part of our budget, our
okay.
year-long budget.
Excellent. You have 10 proposals here as I read through it. We went with one, but I can understand going with 10. But a question I have about that is, excluding the first three, which I know we're not talking funds, but they require minimum funds. So putting those aside for the moment, if you look at the remainder of your proposals, do you have one or two that clearly stand out as the most appropriate to be pursued?
Do we have one? I think that they're from renovating some of the interior here of this particular sanctuary, for instance, to providing a public toilet to some housing. I don't know, they seemed all different. We weren't sure what would capture the imagination and felt the most need to the congregation. So we felt compelled to bring all those suggestions forward, and it's really your vote next week and in the future that will decide that. But I don't think we weighed them all a little bit similarly. We tried to be fair to each one of those ideas, so. Anyone? That's fair. Is that fair?
Yeah.
You good? I understand that each proposal can stand on its own but fall in the general category. And I understand that my question, I'm going to make the bold assumption that this has been discussed. And I would love to just have someone very briefly answer, under the public bathrooms and laundry, that one makes me incredibly nervous. And I'm guessing that that has been a discussion among all of you. Could someone speak to that just for a moment?
Well, we looked at it and then identified several impediments, one being accessibility. Maybe it's not on. No, it says it's on. I'm not known for being shy in front of the microphone. One being the difficulty of getting accessibility to the space. Under the chapel, it only has one sort of exit. Also, it's very difficult to get the plumbing working properly there because it's so far removed from where it actually goes out to the street. Also, the experience that they've had next door at the Methodist Church with trying to do this over, I think, several decades now, and they've given it up, partly because of the difficulty of supervising. What am I forgetting, Doug?
So then why do we turn to the City Hall model?
Okay, of course. Donna did a little bit of research, kind of following up on sometimes what people have seen traveling in Europe, for example, where there are public facilities on the sidewalk or whatever, and followed up on products that are available for that, but they do not sell to individual entities or whatever. Those are sold to municipalities, and then it turned out that City Hall already has one of these units in City Hall Park, and then they would like to find another place to put one, and so that was part of the proposal.
And I'd also like to say that the building group, I think there were originally 14 proposals, and we saw some overlap, so combined it to get them down. But we were charged with getting information and presenting these proposals on everything that was sent to us. So we're not picking and choosing. We're finding the best information we can on each proposal that was presented and then presenting it to you.
I'd like to make a comment. Some among us were nervous about this proposal also, not wanting to draw the homeless population to our property. However, my comment would be this population is already on our property. They're on Buell Street, they're often on our portico, they're right over here at Rite Aid, and these people have no place to go to the bathroom. The downtown businesses would like a public toilet on this end of town. And so we're trying to be community-minded, we're trying to be humanity-minded to address the dignity of these people. The proposal would suggest that perhaps it would be placed over here on Buell Street where people hang out, as close to Winooski Avenue that we could put it so that it would be away from where the daycare, the child care might be put. You know, these people need to be served. They're our brothers and sisters. And yes, it might make us nervous, but we don't want to be not in my backyard kind of people. So thus, we put the proposal forward.
I don't know if this is part of your group, but has anyone talked about the stained glass windows?
That's a facilities question. That's facility, okay. Because they're, it's
Can you have the mic? Someone hand her the mic?
I was just going to say that that's the kind of thing that's a maintenance issue, whether it's something we deal, a lot of maintenance is on a yearly basis or a 5-year or 10-year. These windows are probably on a 75 or 100-year cycle, but that's considered maintenance, and that's, I might point out, that's a part of one reason we need to have capital fund, rather, which is another one of the proposals, so.
I have a question from online from Paul. Did the building committee consider First Church financial support of off-site facilities to emulate? Yes. Some of the needs identified rather than building, renovating here on site.
Except for the childcare, which isn't ours.
No, not to any real extent. I mean, we were looking at mostly how it could affect campus. Yeah, this building and this site.
Our title was building and rehabilitation.
Yeah.
We have 2 more subgroups to go, if I'm keeping track. So any burning building and renovations questions before we shift? Okay, here's our last question.
Hi, if you could just explain a little bit more, I'm a little unclear on the housing at First Church. It says, over the parking lot north of the chapel is your first choice. And, okay, great. Let's see that.
Yeah, Doug could address that.
So this parking lot is still going to be there and the front is still going to be open, but there would be a COTS facility there. Thank you.
I think if you look at, I think on the last page, there's a drawing. Yep.
Mike. There's a drawing on the last page?
Yep.
So look at the parking lot between the chapel and the Ronald McDonald space property.
How would that housing affect the childcare that we propose?
Well, I actually had a specific reaction to that as we were thinking about housing and looking at models like UVM and UVM Medical, thinking about their staff housing. And one idea for me, what if we were to serve those child care providers with this specific housing? We could make a determination around that. So I just wanted to offer that as an idea. That was pretty exciting, but
Yeah, I think there could be coordination between the families that would be housed and their need. Many of the families, when I spoke to COTS about it, the women in particular are wanting to work, but they're unable to find or be able to afford childcare. So there might be some nice connection there.
Great. Kudos to this group. Thank you so much. I'm going to call up environmental assessment at this time. So if you're part of that small group and can come up here, that would be great. Environmental assessment. That's okay.
While they're coming up, I also want to offer from Elizabeth on the child care team that the child care committee considered it too, and they were tasked with doing the research to offer you these programs at our, I'm just going to read Liz's thing rather than trying to paraphrase. I think each group was tasked with doing the research to propose back to you all what it would cost to offer these programs at our space and use of our building differently in order to determine if offering them here is possible or not. Later, human resource workers with preference to childcare or healthcare. So essentially what you were just saying, but I want to offer that the childcare team also did consider that as part of their work.
Great. Do you mind introducing yourself and maybe
Sure.
sharing who else was a part of this group with you?
I'm Doug Veman. Neither Eric Davis nor Bob McCarron could be here today, and the fourth person, Lauren Larkin, who was on our team, actually met with us the first 2 or 3 meetings and then just couldn't keep up with it. So too many other obligations, but she did have input at the beginning.
Questions about environmental assessment? All right. You're right next to each other. I like that. You timed it. Coordinated.
Doug, the proposal suggests that VGS, which I assume is the gas supplier, might be able to get us some rebates up to 50% of what they're involved in. Out of that, 300 to 400 plus thousands of dollars, what amount of that is gas related?
So the gas, there are several parts that could be funded or rebates. Blower door test on the building, which identifies where all the air leaks out of. They would partially fund that. Couple thousand dollars. Any upgrades to the heating system, they would partially fund that. Again, that might be $5,000 or $10,000.
So this is a relatively small percentage of the outlay.
Yeah.
Okay, that answers my question.
I had a question about the solar panels on the roof. It's a membrane roof. I guess it's the education wing.
No, both.
No, all of it. Okay. If you have a membrane roof, is it going to be replaced in a few years anyways? So
our current roof is coming up on 30 years old. Both membranes were put on at the same time, and we've had it reseamed twice, just recently, about 3 years ago, and each reseaming lasts about 10 years. This last time they said that the membrane itself was actually in pretty good shape still, so that's why they reseamed it. But 10 years from now, that might be a different, the sun beats down on it, it's a black roof. Our proposal with the solar includes a new roof. So those costs include re-roofing. And that we would put a light colored membrane down, which lasts a lot longer. Same material that never it doesn't heat up as much, so it lasts a lot longer. And then the solar panels shade it, which also increases the lifespan.
Other questions for environmental assessment?
Do you know how much the solar panels will produce, how much?
In the full proposal, it says that the income would be somewhere $12,000 to $13,000 a year. So it's about a 10 to 12 year payback.
Am I missing any hands? Yeah, sorry, Julie.
And I want to say Eric is online too, if there's something I can't answer.
With what you just said, Doug, do you mean that the solar panels would cover all the electricity needs of the church plus supply an additional $12,000 to $13,000?
No, the total is about $12,000 to $13,000. Our annual electric bill is about $8,500 right now.
Okay, is about $8,500. Got it. Still surplus.
Part of the calculations there include that we're going to do a lot of controlling air infiltration and reducing our energy costs, right? So how's that balance out?
That reduces the gas cost, not the electrical cost, because we don't have electric heat.
Okay, Andy. Thank you for meeting me halfway.
If we do a lot of this testing, mold, asbestos, lead, PCBs, presumably there's a possibility we open up big cans of worms. For buildings like this, of this age, in this part of the world, do we have a sense for what we might be inviting in terms of additional work in the future?
This summer, we're having the exterior of the sanctuary painted from this corner all the way around to, actually including the exterior of the midway. So it comes all the way around to that corner, and they're doing lead mitigation as part of that. This age building, you assume everything that's painted white has lead paint in it. It's just the way it was pre-1978. And so yes, mitigation of those things does have to happen. So in the child care proposals, we did assume that we'd have to mitigate lead and asbestos as in those areas as part of those, and that's built into the costs of that. We did not deal with the lead solder and the piping. The proposal under here is pretty much all new piping from the water heater over, since there is no existing piping going over here anymore. So most of that is, lead-free. And I know there are some fairly expensive pieces of equipment you can put in that help with removing lead from the water. And there's no asbestos down here, so yeah, the dollars went to lead.
I'm aware I'm already 10 minutes over, and we keep losing folks, which is fine, because you can leave when you need to. Any last-minute burning questions here? Because I'd like to be able to have energy and focus on our last group as well before I completely have everyone running for the hills. Thank you so much, Doug, and for the environmental assessment team.
And if they're ever like a movie, I'm now Bob McCurran and Eric playing them. So.
Partnering with current programs and expansions. Last but not least, please come on up. And we will ask questions. And then just a reminder, we'll end with the discernment activity that Alyssa will lead us with. Quick discernment. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started with introductions and then questions.
Cindy Hall.
Cindy McHugh.
Liz Corker.
Tony Hall.
Questions for this group? Yes, Louise.
I realize that this is a long process, started quite a while ago and will go quite a while into the future. But my question is about some of the time-sensitive issues that are in the current proposal, specifically the monies for JUMP and for the HOPE Fund, which are, and even the dues for VIA. So just, I don't want to bring up cash flow and any of that, but just those ideas that need to be in our heads, that some of these are time sensitive, and it doesn't seem that this process will complete itself in time for some of these things.
So a couple of comments. One is that what we were dealt with is a proposed $25,000 to Hope Fund. That is a new commitment. I don't think it has anything to do with any commitments, as far as I can tell. In asking around, it appears that that will be in addition to the commitment we had already made. And that the prior commitment was over 3 years, so that's not going to be a problem, I don't think, as I see it. And with JUMP, I think some of you may have heard, but JUMP right now is reevaluating, reassessing, reorganizing, and although they have lost some staff that they are hoping to replace once they get reorganized, right now that whole issue is totally on hold, because we don't know what they're going to decide, what they're going to need or anything. So that we found out after we got started with this and after the proposal was put in. So that's totally on hold now and not really an issue. And then there is a question about the money for VIA, but that's something that's been happening anyway, so I guess it probably can continue to happen. Thank you.
Well, it hasn't been fully funded.
Which?
The VIA.
And that's a discussion we can have, and right now we're trying to avoid the money issue,
Right.
because that's not relevant yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can verify they'll still take our money. Sorry, Louise, you've heard me say that before. No, Yeah, no, I think what Louise is bringing up is, I think, something that's really important that comes up in this proposal in ways that it doesn't in the others, which is one of the charges of this whole process is now with the sale of the Ronald McDonald House, we have to think about how we do our giving, right? And so that comes up in this proposal in a different way. So thank you for raising that, yeah.
I've got a question regarding night minister. My question deals with how far along Reverend Wood is in potential conversations with other faith communities. Do we have a sense that there are others who might see this as a need that they're willing to put some money behind, or is this still very much in the formative stages and we may be sort of the lead?
Yes, you're absolutely right. This is just beginning. It's a new, I keep forgetting her name, has been there 2 years, and she basically is in training for chaplain type positions, but she is very much interested in street ministry and sees that at some point in the future, 5 years or more out, it might be that the program is developed and the interest is great enough that there could be some help there. But we've talked with a couple of other sources and just made contact with a new source after this went to print. So this whole idea of a street ministry is very much just in the beginning talk stages.
I read in the more detailed proposal that Jump was really interested in the space under the pulpit. That was so when we toured with Catherine Stockman a while back. However, in more recent conversations with Wanda, she told me that they want to continue using the space in the narthex of the chapel. They do not want to be in an isolated space for reasons of safety with their clientele. So I just thought maybe we should all be informed about that.
That's fine, and also again, they are so retooling everything. We don't know and they don't know what their program is going to look like, right, and what space. The message that we had gotten is that they were interested in down there. Had not heard anything
just
more.
So we not thinking that space under there is under contest.
Yeah, no. I mean, at this point, everything is dependent on what we decide, how the Holy Spirit guides us in deciding what's going to be the best use.
Any burning last question for community partners, outreach?
Could I make one more comment, Jennifer? Because there
No.
was the question earlier whether we had made any, well, we're last, contact with Abnaki. And yes, we have, as in the more complete one comments, that Tony had a lovely conversation with Chief Stevens, and that it partly based on how that conversation went. That's why we sort of did make a recommendation that we continue to build that relationship. So we have made some contact.
Great. I see one last. Diana, you're going to be our last question before Alyssa guides us in some discernment.
It's a point of information. What is our situation with VIA now? Do we have a representative there on a committee in general? What is our role there?
We do have a representative on the board that we all know well. And it fluctuates a little bit, but there are at least 2 or 3 other members. I'm going to say your name wrong, Bill Neal. I'm always putting the wrong last name with you. Bill Neal has been serving on one of their groups, and other people have also served on groups with that organization. So we are already involved.
And Louise, you could speak more to this, but we have in the past paid our dues. There's a partnership fee essentially to work with them. And we have done that by Christmas and Easter offerings, which now are dedicated to the Hope Fund for the next few years. So that's, I think, what part of where the question is coming about the dues to VIA, right? So we do pay dues to them in order to participate. We're considered an active and good standing member.
Thank you to each of you for staying this long. But I also want to say a big thanks to all of the individuals that have come forward and aren't here today that did work on these proposals. Can we do one more round of applause for all of this? I know along with the Vision team, are excited to join together next week as we collectively, as a congregation, enter into discernment around which items we move forward to some strategic planning and feasibility that then get put forward to the trustees and for a congregational vote after that. But before we leave today, Alyssa's going to lead us into some discernment
Very
exploration.
quick, I promise. I also do just want to give one more really big thank you to Michelle. Michelle, can you just give a wave for those who don't know you? This is a year's worth of work from a lot of people, and Michelle managed to make it beautiful and legible in the span of a week, and I don't know how you did it, but I'm grateful. So I'm just going to give you the 5 steps of discernment and leave you with one exercise to take with you. We're not going to do it, okay? So Ignatius was considered the father of Christian discernment, using our Christian faith to guide us in discernment. He's from 100, so very early on. He has 5 key steps. The first is perhaps the trickiest, although it seems simple. Try to decide precisely how you would ask the question, what are you being asked, right? And spend a good deal of time on that. What is the question we are trying to answer in discernment? I might phrase it, where is God guiding this community in our next chapter? We each might have a slightly different answer to that. What is the question we are trying to answer with our discernment? Okay. The second is to pray to be like an equilibrium. Completely balanced, not leaning towards one thing or another, even a proposal that you've worked on, right? Try and be like an equilibrium balance. The third is to keep the goal of your existence at the forefront. So why does this church exist? So 1, what is the question? 2, be like a balance at equilibrium. 3, why does First Church exist? Love of God, love of neighbor. 4, prayer. Ask God to move you to seek only what is most conducive to God's purposes. Okay? And then lastly, once it has become clear to you, to do it all over again to make sure. Really, that's the 5th step. Okay? So the exercise that I want to leave you with, in addition to those 5 steps, is to imagine there's a person who's coming to you and says, my congregation is having a discernment vote over the next week. But over the next week, I'm supposed to discern how I see God's Spirit moving in this community in the next chapter. What advice do you have to give me? That's it. Answer that question. What advice do you have to give that person who's seeking to discern the movement of God in their church in its next chapter? Okay? All right, your homework is assigned. Thanks be to God, and thanks be to each and every single one of you. Amen.